In Days of Great Peace is a wonderful book. It's an intimate inner pilgrimage. It's a journey beyond words, beyond the restless mind, a journey into the heart of being. And it's written by Mouni Sadhu after his profound experiences with Ramana Maharshi. This book is more than a memoir. It's a record of awakening, of a soul stripped of illusion and offered to silence. Every page carries the quiet vibration of one who has seen through the veils of the world and touched the timeless presence within. As you listen, allow these words to slow your breath and still your thoughts. This is not a story to be hurried through. It's a transmission, a contemplative rhythm that invites you into the same peace that Mouni Sadhu discovered in the radiant stillness of Ramana's gaze. And yet, the book, not just a remembrance, becomes a living doorway to the great peace that awaits you in the depth of your own heart. In Days of Great Peace by Mouni Sadhu. And before I start reading this book, I'm going to read a few sentences from the introduction to the first edition. I have not tried to write down any of the teachings of Maharshi, as they can be found in many books. My purpose is to record that which the latter do not yet contain, namely the real experiences of an average man who wanted to know for himself what the presence of a great sage means and what its influence is. I had read so many descriptions by pupils who were clever in classifying the qualities and the teachings of their masters that I should have known, at least in theory, what may be expected in the presence of one of them. But all theories, all acquired knowledge, falls into dust when one stands face to face with a perfect man. Chapter 1. Association with the Sages. Association with the sages who have realized the truth removes material attachments. On these attachments being removed, the attachments of the mind are quite destroyed. Those for whom attachments of the mind are thus destroyed become one with that which is motionless. They attain liberation while yet alive. Cherish, therefore, the association with such sages. From Maharshi's Truth Revealed. Another version. Association with the sages who have realized the truth cuts off material attachments. On these being dropped, the mental predispositions due to past karma and present delusionaire dispelled. Peace in which the unattached ones remain is that which is ever in hanging and immovable. It is Jivan Mukti, or liberation here and now. Seek therefore not the association with such liberated beings. Ramana Maharshi left this world 6 months after my departure from India. These words were almost his last. They say I am dying, but I shall be here more alive than ever. Where else would I go? Several of his disciples, residing thousands of miles away from the ashram, knew of his death on the very same day. Comparing the hour with the time when the news was mystically communicated to them, one would say it was broadcast several hours before Maharshi's body breathed its last. Letters took a week or more to come from India and elsewhere, and they showed that no true disciple of the Master experienced any grief or despair. The same spiritual atmosphere of a lucid wave of peace and light was felt in the hearts of the pupils, whether abroad or in the ashram of the saint. The world, with its physical phenomena, is for our real self like a dream for the waking man, or like a shadow. Is he concerned with the passing dreams of last night, or with the shadow cast by his body? From Maharshi's sayings. Not one of the religions of the world has succeeded in spiritualizing and giving happiness to humanity, yet each one has given liberation in common language to many individuals. From the sayings of the famous Indian philosopher Sri Aurobindo. The spiritual power of every saint and sage is most vividly and directly felt by his contemporaries. With the passing of time, what was a revelation becomes only a dead dogma. And when people canonize the saint and build temples to him, they enclose him in their narrow walls, wherein his spirit is suffocated and ceases to be a vivifying and inspiring force. The followers of successive generations quarrel about each and every word ascribed to the Master. They fight for the authenticity of texts. They do all but one important thing, which was taught by the Great One, namely, to become like unto him. Yet not all the seeds fall on stony ground. Some give a rich harvest. Therein lies hope for the future of erring mankind. The lives of men, like Maharshi, are the very proofs of this truth. They are like meteors, which in their course brighten the darkest night. Those who are able to perceive the path in this flash of light will thenceforward know where it leads. In Days of Great Peace by Mouni Sadhu, Chapter 2, The First Meeting. When I arrived at the abode of Maharshi, called Ramana Ashram, and I jumped out of the two-wheeled cart just in front of the temple, in spite of the late hour, but in accordance with the custom of the place, I was taken straight into the presence of the sage. He was sitting in a large hall near one of its walls, apparently at the end of his meal. There were a number of people, all Indians, sitting in rows on the floor between the pillars. I was led to within 3 or 4 yards of Maharshi, and my companion said a few words to him, of which the name of the country from which I came was the only one I understood. The saint lifted his head, looked at me, and made a gesture with his hand as if inviting me to come a little nearer. I was struck by the softness and serenity of this movement, so simple and dignified that I immediately felt I was facing a great man. His attitude was so natural that the newcomer did not feel any wonder or shyness. All his critical faculty of thought and his curiosity dropped away. So I was unable to make observations by comparisons, although subconsciously I may have had this intention when previously imagining this first meeting. The image of the sage was, in this very first moment, vividly engraved on my mind, without any qualifications, like a picture cast on a sensitive photo plate. But as nothing can be conveyed without words, I will try to describe his appearance. Maharshi, as I saw him, was a thin, white-haired, very gracious old man. His skin had the color of old ivory. His movements were easy, calm, and soft. His countenance breathed a natural state of inner concentration without the slightest effort of will. Or may I say that he had reached that stage when willpower no longer needs to be used for overcoming any hindrance or for achieving any purpose, for the simple reason that everything has already been achieved. It was the first manifestation of the invisible radiance which I witnessed every day during subsequent months. Just now, as I'm writing these words, I wonder how it is that I have never forgotten even the smallest detail concerning Maharshi. It can be evoked in my brain like a picture on a hidden sensitive plate, of whose very existence I was unaware. A modest Indian supper was served, a little rice, vegetables, and fruit on a banana leaf. By the time I had finished, Maharshi had gone. As soon as I found myself in a small one-room cottage prepared for me in the ashram's compound, I immediately fell asleep, being very tired after my whole day's journey. In Days of Great Peace by Mouni Sadhu, Chapter 3, Life in Maharshi's Ashram. The next day was occupied in getting acquainted with the routine of the ashram, the hours of meditation in the presence of the sage, the time of meals in the dining hall, and so on. I had to protect some foodstuffs which I had brought with me against the ants. They quickly found their way into my sugar and biscuits and gathered round my tins of honey, although these were hermetically sealed. I had also to arrange for drinking water to be brought from the nearby tap. The simple way of life in the ashram helps one to concentrate and dive deep into oneself. The very atmosphere, charged with the thoughts of so many people seeking their real self, according to the teachings of the Master, turns the mind inwards and is favorable to introspection. The invisible yet powerful influence of the sacred hill of Arunachala also had its part in creating this particular atmosphere, but of that I will speak later. At 7 a.m., there was the loud sound of a gong calling us to breakfast. When I reached the dining hall, Maharshi was just mounting the few steps leading to it. He was accompanied by several Indians, his permanent attendants. Here, in full daylight, I noticed for the first time that the physical state of Maharshi was really precarious. He walked with difficulty, as his joints and knees were affected by acute rheumatism. His left arm and elbow were bandaged because of a malignant tumor, which had begun its growth about 6 months earlier, and in spite of 2 operations had continued to spread its devastating work, causing Maharshi's death 1 year later. Sometimes his head shook slightly, and this increased the impression of serious ill health. The whole frame, once tall and powerful, was now bent and weak. After reaching the hall, Maharshi took his place near the wall, opposite the entrance. He sat alone, while facing him plantain leaves were spread on the floor for the rest of the residents. I occupied a place on his right, about 3 yards away, and that spot remained mine during the whole period of my stay. The sage ate with his hand according to the general Indian custom. His movements seemed to be automatic. I saw that he was quite aware of his surroundings and reacted in a normal way to all the phenomena of the outward world. But I felt certain that his real self had nothing to do with the functions and actions of his visible vehicle. After a time, I understood that according to his own teachings, his physical plane of existence was like a dream for him. I also understood that unless I was able to realize for myself this state as regards the outer world, I could never know reality. The grasping of this truth is our first real step to getting rid of the mind's fetters. During all our lives, the mind constantly creates scores of purposeless thoughts. One of the European disciples of the sage rightly remarked, "Our mind creates its own problems and then tries to solve them, but it will never find a final solution, as this does not exist in its limited sphere of activity." There are 3 communal meals in the ashram: lunch or dinner at about 11:30 a.m., supper at 7:30 p.m., and also tea at 3:30 p.m. For the ashram guests and occasional visitors, one is given tea, coffee, or by special request, milk, as was the case with me. The dishes are well prepared, but some vegetables and pastries have condiments added and are too hot for the European palate. But I soon discovered that in this tropical climate the stronger spices are good, and I took all the burning curries and sauces, with only a few exceptions, although I must admit that the Brahmin who served us, after noticing what remained on my plantain leaf, ceased serving me the hottest dishes. Maharshi took a little of everything. At the end of the meal, when buttermilk was distributed, he made a kind of round wall of rice, leaving a space in the middle for the liquid. When he had enough, he stopped with a gesture the Brahmin who was serving. He never left a single grain of rice on his leaf. This is regarded as a duty by everyone obeying Hindu customs, which direct each step the individual takes on the physical plane. In the beginning, I could not understand this seeming submission to outer customs by a great sage who sees the whole world as an illusion of the mind and its servants, the 5 senses. But later on, when in the presence of Maharshi, my own mind became more and more quiet, more fit to judge rightly, and when all the horizons of thought were clearer, this doubt, as well as many others, disappeared. During the first weeks of my stay in the ashram, Maharshi spent the whole day, with the exception of the hours of sleep and food, under a small bamboo roof near the library building, facing the dining room. He reclined on a big stone couch covered with mats, cotton rugs, and a few pillows. As soon as I saw the stone couch, the thought came to my mind, which, according to the old European habit, must judge everything by their appearance, that Maharshi's rheumatism may have developed from sitting for many years on stone. I did not realize that what may be true in colder countries need not necessarily be true in India, for afterwards I found during my night wanderings on the sacred hill that the big rocks where I sat were quite warm several hours after sunset and did not become cold the whole night through. His disciples and visitors sat on the concrete floor facing Maharshi. For the morning and evening meditations, certain sadhus, pupils of the master, often came from the caves. Every day the Vedas were recited, and before the night meal, holy hymns were chanted, often those composed by the Maharshi himself in his younger days. Every fortnight, one of the permanent residents, a learned Brahmin, sang a most beautiful hymn. It was, as I learned, in praise of the Lord of the universe. It was full of melodic implications, and the endings of the words, which of course I did not understand, will remain forever in my memory, like so many other things in this abode of peace. Later, amidst the turmoil of worldly life, when I remembered Maharshi's words, think about your real self and understand the need of doing so, I found that the memory of this melody, the sound of it inwardly heard, immediately established harmony in my consciousness. It took some time before I could adjust myself to the rhythm of ashram life and could inwardly approach Maharshi. At first, I had to struggle with mental distrust and the tendency to look for blemishes in the lives of those who surrounded the sage. I was simply wasting precious time in a vain fight with my mental windmills. I was looking on Maharshi from the narrow citadel of my ego and of my own small personality. I was aware that I should not do so, that I should step out of myself into a broader path, and that only thus could I find enlightenment. I was going through a trial well known to occult psychologists. The mind may reason and discuss lofty matters. It may even be able to create works where spiritual ideas are well expounded under the inspiration of the master. But when the real, actual experience approaches, when one has to live what was so cleverly expressed, then a gap appears. A jarring note sounds. Yet, as days passed, the radiance emanating from the sage was slowly doing its invisible work. At first, I wanted to have a talk with him, but I was disheartened by the shallowness of what I tried to say. Then at last, intuition showed the proper way. Silence is the most powerful form of teaching, transmitted from master to pupil. There is no word by which one can convey the important things, the deepest truths. From Maharshi's sayings. So I gather by the structure of that sentence, and then it says from Maharshi's sayings, that is actually from Maharshi's sayings. So I will read that sentence again. Silence is the most powerful form of teaching, transmitted from the master to pupil. There is no word by which one can convey the important things, the deepest truths. I began to listen intently to the silence surrounding the master. I understood what a high degree of concentration of the control of the movement of thoughts is necessary to be able to open the door of the mind to the subtle vibrations constantly radiated by Maharshi and leading one to higher initiation. I also came to understand that my previous exercises were not of the best, and they would prove insufficient. At first, it was rather depressing to see that all my former methods had to be re-examined and changed. I realized that the amount of knowledge I could find and assimilate here depended upon my own attitude, and that I myself was responsible for catching and using to the full this unique opportunity of being at Maharshi's feet, an opportunity which would never again be repeated. In other words, the amount of light penetrating into my being would depend directly upon the opening of the doors of my consciousness. In practice, it was not at all easy to let go of my self-centered opinions, all forms of crystallized beliefs, comparisons, and prejudices. Many of these beliefs had been regarded by me as unshakable, and now I saw that they would not stand the fiery test of the presence of one who had realized the truth. Comparison with some masters of the past was especially responsible for many moments of inner conflict. What I queried is the role of Buddha, of Christ, and of other great masters who have shown humanity such wonderful paths to salvation. Should we not adhere to those who have given us such unmistakable signs of their divinity? Should we not continue to walk in their holy footsteps? There are many other doubts and hesitations, but I do not think it useful to repeat here all such misconceived ideas. The answers to my doubts came quite unexpectedly, and simply as did everything in this strange abode. I was told that once when a European Roman Catholic couple were sitting at Maharshi's feet, and probably under the charm of the incomparable sanctity and sublimity of the atmosphere, were expressing their emotions in the form of prayers traditionally most familiar to them. The sage remarked, "They have another master. They pray to him, but this makes no difference. There is but one." I had read much about Maharshi before coming to the ashram. I knew that he sees the content of the inner being of every man who approaches him, although he never shows that he does so, or speaks about it. So this case was not surprising to me, but I had also personally to experience this extraordinary power of the Master. It was essential, for without a complete trust in the Master, without a belief that his consciousness is one with the Absolute, as well as one with that of his pupil, the realization of self-knowledge is impossible. As week after week is spent near him, the shell of the separated personality bursts and dissolves. I always feel this process when I am with him. The important turning point in my own life came on the day when Maharshi had moved, according to the decision of the ashram high command, in brackets, his brother and the staff administering the outer affairs of the ashram, close bracket, to the hall of the newly built temple. It was built in purely Hindu style on the spot where his mother was buried in 1922. There were rumors that at first Maharshi did not want to move, saying he was quite comfortable under the little bamboo roof. But when his brother, the superintendent of the ashram, and some of his staff prostrated before the saint, imploring him to agree, he answered that it mattered little where one stays, and he yielded to their entreaties. A big couch carved in granite and covered with embroidered Indian rugs was awaiting the sage in the temple, which had to be his last abode. The temple, in the ancient traditional Hindu style, with the happy addition of some modern comforts, is built from gray granite, which has been beautifully carved, with not too many sculptures or other ornamentation, with slender columns in the middle, large windows, and many doors, with modern electric fans and strong fluorescent lamps. It makes a very pleasant impression indeed. Near Maharshi's couch stood a shelf with books, a small table, and a clock, and in front of him was an incense holder with Indian incense sticks burning all day long and spreading their fragrance throughout the hall. At noon, Maharshi was taken into the temple hall with some solemnity, but I was not present as I had left after the morning meditation. When I returned in the afternoon, I had to find a place for myself in this new abode and chose one by the nearest column, facing Maharshi, from which I could always look into his eyes. The hall was divided into two parts. Men sat on the right and women on the left. A small portable barrier in front of the sage's couch showed the limit of approach to the devotees and visitors. Maharshi was sitting as usual with legs crossed in a posture of meditation and reclining on several pillows, his head slightly bent towards the shoulder. One could see that the previous ceremonies had tired his weak physical frame. This weakness troubled me at first, if one can be troubled at all in his presence. Later on, I became accustomed to this sight. I also came to pay less attention to the visible side of things, and therefore was less anxious or concerned about it. The recitation of the Vedas began about 5:15 p.m. and lasted for 45 minutes. After that, Maharshi went through his letters, which came from all parts of the world, gave a hasty glance at the newspapers, and then the secretary of the ashram, an educated Indian with a long grayish beard, a loincloth, and a piece of white toweling over his shoulders as his only garments, brought a pile of letters for approval in answer to the previous day's mail. Maharshi carefully read through them, putting them back in their respective addressed envelopes. Sometimes the sage made a few remarks, but this was rather rare, and then the secretary took back such letters for correction in accordance with his suggestions. At last all the activities of the day came to an end, and there was silence and peace. In Days of Great Peace by Mouni Sadhu, Chapter 4, Tears. With some effort of will, I impose calm on my mind. It does not create thoughts anymore. Those which appear immediately vanish like small clouds in the Indian sky. I am gazing intently at the saint, looking into his great, widely open dark eyes. Suddenly, I begin to understand. How can I express in our earthly language what exactly I do understand? How shall I tell in words, based on the common ideas and experiences of ordinary people who are creating and molding our language, these higher and more subtle things? I may say that I understand that the Maharshi's life is not concentrated on this, our earthly plane, that it extends far beyond our world, that he contemplates a different and real world, a world not subject to storms and changes, that he is a torch of light before the throne of the Most High, shedding its rays all around, that he is like the incense smoke constantly rising towards the blue sky, which we see through the temple roof, that his eyes, just now looking at me, seem to convey, no, I am unable to say anything more. I cannot even think. I only feel a stream of tears upon my face. They are abundant and serene. They flow silently. It is not suffering, regret, or repentance that is their source. I do not know how to name their cause. And through these tears, I look at the Master. He knows full well their origin. His serious, almost solemn face expresses endless understanding and friendship, and glows with inner light that makes it so different from all other human faces. In the light of his profound gaze, I suddenly understand the reason and purpose of my tears. Yes, I see at last. The sudden illumination is too strong to allow immediate belief in the truth of the seen. Is this really possible? Can it be possible? But Maharshi's eyes seem to bring a confirmation of it. I can only say that there are moments of inner experience so important, so fraught with consequences, that they may influence not only one but many incarnations. There are stains which have to be washed out before more light can be seen. No water from an earthly vessel can wash them out, can purify the soul. It may be that the only vessel which can serve this purpose is the heart, the only water, a stream of tears. Quote, peace that passeth all human understanding. End quote. Similar meditations continue for a few more days and are followed by another stage. Tears give way to an inner quietude and a feeling of inexpressible, indescribable happiness. This inner mood is independent of any outward condition. Neither the pain of the limbs, which is often annoying when one has been sitting for several hours in the same position, nor the troublesome black mosquitoes, nor the trying heat can disturb this inner peace. This state lasts as long as I do not allow the mind to create new thoughts. But as soon as the concentration ceases, peace also vanishes. And once more the world with all its problems steps in. Worries, anxieties, expectations appear again. But once we have discovered the secret of this experience, the door to its repetition is opened. We can recover it at will. I am quite aware that the assistance of the Master is a most important factor in these first glimpses of the supramental consciousness. I do not think he is definitely and actively intervening, but his presence, his constant radiation, spontaneously brings about this effect. I look at the people gathered in the temple hall, Brahmins and outcasts, Europeans and Americans, men and women, the old, the young, and small children. All are happy here at the feet of the saint. Everyone feels his happiness according to his own capacity and degree of receptivity. The learned Brahmin may think that by being here, he is nearer to liberation from the wheel of births and deaths. The black Dravidian farmer trusts that the crops on his small rice field will be richer after his visit to the ashram to pay homage at the feet of the rishi. An American may hope to find salvation and the bliss of samadhi, and an artiste, a former film star from North India, beautiful in her silver gray sari, may already feel herself to be in Svarga, the Indian paradise. To me, it seems that the thick mist covering the horizon is slowly becoming less dense, that the day is nearing when nothing will stand any more between me and reality. I also see in these moments the tremendous amount of labor ahead of me. I see that I am short of so many of the necessary qualifications, but this sight does not bring depression as it usually did before. The experienced peace being out of time, the question when and how does not arise. I remember Maharshi's words in answer to a similar question. I read them lately, and they seem to confirm my feeling. Quote, "The real self is all. It is omnipresent, hence always with us. To live in it is realization. End of quote. In Days of Great Peace by Mouni Sadhu, Chapter 5. The glory of the Lord is manifested in his saints. Today I have carefully watched Maharshi when he was officiating, or as the Hindus say, giving darshan, which means he is visible for all to see, from morning till noon, and from 3:30 till evening. He sits in the temple hall or under the bamboo roof near the library, surrounded by a group of pupils and residents of the ashram, and by a crowd of visitors and pilgrims. He speaks very little, and cases where he addresses anyone are rare indeed. His face is full of inspiration, unearthly serenity and power, of infinite kindness and understanding. His dark eyes seem to look into the infinite, above the heads of all present, without appearing to concentrate on anyone in particular, and yet penetrating to the deepest recesses of each individual heart. This can be felt as one looks into them, and it is really difficult not to plunge our gaze into those eyes when we are near Maharshi. He reigns in silence over this very crowd, being a focus for so many different human feelings. The ways of our thought are being changed here. New ideas enter the field of our consciousness. The atmosphere of utter purity and peace constantly radiates by the sage, compels each one of us to examine and verify, as it were, all our beliefs and opinions, yet it comes by itself spontaneously, without any effort on our part. It is not imposed, it is simply the result of a sudden enlargement of consciousness. This inner process is accompanied by a sense of great happiness. It is not passivity of the mind, dolce far niente, as the Italians say. Not at all. This state is our birthright, as it were, earned by a long practice of concentration and purification of the mind from all the rubbish of worldly thoughts. In the presence of Maharshi, this process becomes free and natural. It ceases to be a labor and a toil, an effort without any certainty of success, as it so often is. I come out for a moment from my meditation to look at the Master. I know that in a second I shall be able to return to it with the greatest ease, plunging again into the same inner world. Maharshi is sitting, as before, with his head slightly bent over one shoulder and his immobile gaze fixed in the vast beyond. The electric lights have been switched on, and women who have to leave the hall at 6 p.m. have already left. Only about a dozen people remain, who every night take part in the most mystic, invisible worship performed by Maharshi at this hour of the day. The word worship may not be either a strict or an adequate expression, but for the moment I cannot find a better one, and I do not want to seek for words laboriously. The sensitive reader will understand, and to those who are unable to grasp these things, even the most suitable words will be of no avail. I suddenly realize that these are the last months of Maharshi's service to humanity in his human form. the days of his life in this body may be really few, in spite of the fact that some of his devotees are still hoping for a miracle. I hear there will be one more operation. Personally, I am unable to await any miracle. The glow, the reflection of the real, which I see through the Master, illuminates my mind. It sees more clearly now, and perhaps is nearer to truth. If anything happens according to the highest will of that which establishes the laws of existence, out of which we are able to see only effects, it would be senseless to hope for that same will to contradict itself. If the last sacrifice of the saint has taken the form of an incurable disease, according to laws known to us, which always lead in an appropriate time to the death of the physical body, how then can it happen that his will be resisted? It would be a contradiction, impossible to admit, even for the limited human mind. Hence, I personally have no consolation in this hope for a miracle. But I have another one, namely that I do not believe at all in the departure of the Master, although I have not by any means yet won my last battle with matter, or rather with its illusion, and probably my way to this victory is still long. I already do not believe in the real existence of the enemy. If he were real, there would be no path, no possibility of victory at all, as the real cannot be overthrown. For me, Maharshi will never depart. It was not without a definite purpose that it had been given to us, who are now surrounding the sage, to be born in the same time with him, and to have the privilege of seeing the light he sheds upon the world. I remember his own words spoken to a pupil on this matter. A wave of endless bliss surges through and overwhelms me. It carries me beyond thought, beyond suffering and grief. Neither death nor change exists there, only infinite being. Time disappears. There is no need of it anymore. I do not know how long this wave of light reigned within me. At last, I felt I should look through my closed eyelids at the Master, and without opening my eyes, I see, or rather know, that the saint has fixed his immovable gaze upon me. That is the key to my experience. In Days of Great Peace by Mouni Sadhu, Chapter 6, The Man Sri Maharshi. Maharshi was born on the 31st of December, 1879, in a village near Madura in South India. He was named Venkataraman. He belonged to a respected but not influential Brahmin family, his father being a pleader. He and his elder brother were educated at the local high school. At 16, he was preparing for matriculation at Madras University. Up to that time, there was nothing to make anyone suspect that a spiritual genius was here in embryo. Venkataraman was a beautiful, healthy boy, loving sport and physical exercise, but not overly keen on study. There was a legend in his family that from every generation, one of its sons would leave home and discard the worldly life. The only spiritual books which had made an impression on the boy were The Life of Kabir, Kabir, and descriptions of the lives of 63 saints of Shiva's cult. Maharshi later said that when he read the latter, a strange desire arose in him, a yearning to be one of those saints. Finally, when listening to his uncle speaking about pilgrimage to Arunachala, a holy hill some 100 miles from Madura, the very word Arunachala struck a responsive chord in the heart of the youth. He asked his uncle to tell him all about this Mount Arunachala. Sometime later, he had an extraordinary experience. Suddenly, while alone in his room, a terrible fear and realization of death came over him. The young Venkataraman, in perfect health and without any outward suffering, felt that his last hour had come. His reaction was entirely different from what one would expect. He called for no help, nor did he seek a doctor, but quietly lay down on the floor, saying to himself, "Death is coming to me, but death of what? My body is already lying without movement. It is becoming cold and stiff, but my consciousness, is not affected at all. I am therefore independent of this dying form. I am not this body." After some time, life came back to the corpse-like body, but its dweller was changed. His experience brought to him the conviction of the independence of his real self from the temporary and falsely called I. Shortly after this, he left Madura, giving no indication of his destination, leaving only a note for his family asking them not to worry and not to seek him, as he assured them he was embarking on a virtuous enterprise. Taking only enough money to pay part of his fare, he traveled by train and on foot to Tiruvannamalai. That's a difficult name to say. Tiruvannamalai, the nearest township to Mount Arunachala. He then stayed at the numerous temples and shrines in the neighborhood, cutting his hair and discarding his Brahmin clothes as a sign of his renunciation of the world. Nobody knew him. He sat for days unconscious of his body, immersed in deep samadhi, and at first the new spiritual awakening brought complete neglect of his outer personality. Hungry and emaciated, eating only the scraps of food brought to him by visitors who took pity on the young ascetic, and speaking no word in his observance of the silence, in brackets Mouna, Mouna, the future great Rishi spent long years of extremely strenuous life at the foot of the sacred Arunachala. The fame of the boy grew. Now food was offered to him in plenty, but he took only what was needed to keep alight the flame of his physical life. His spirituality was such that no one of any perception could come near him without recognizing his unique quality. Then came the first disciples in the persons of various swamis and devotees. In those years of complete silence, he left his first written teachings addressed to some faithful attendants who wanted to have his instructions. In extremely concentrated form, the young sage gave his teaching to the world in 2 small books entitled Who Am I? And Spiritual Instruction. This phase of strictly ascetic life in caves on the sacred hill of Arunachala ended at the repeated entreaties of his attendants, and he took up his abode in a small shelter in a clearing in the jungle at the foot of the hill. In the meantime, his mother and only living younger brother, the future superintendent of the ashram, found him and begged him to return home. He refused, but when his mother lost the house where he was born and had no one to support her aging years, he agreed to her living at the ashram. She looked after the cooking for him, his attendants and visitors, and became his pupil. Under his guidance, it is believed that she attained samadhi. A new period of life began for the sage. From near and far came pilgrims and devotees who had heard of the unique spirituality of Maharshi. The name was first bestowed on him by a learned pandit, Ganapati Sastri, who sat at his feet, plying him with questions. From the answers given, it was recognized that this young saint was of the highest rank, known in India as the great rishis, or seers. Seers. S-E-E-R-S, seers. After the publication of a book by Narasimha Swami about the life and teaching of Maharshi, and after A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton appeared in London, an uninterrupted flow of visitors from all over the world began. Talks with him by pilgrims from all over the country, and his answers to their problems became famous. Eminent intellectuals from the West also sat at his feet, and some of their reminiscences have appeared in At the Foot of Arunachala, published at his 50 years jubilee. His brother had taken over the management of the ashram's affairs, administrating them with great ability. But Maharshi never cared for the temporal and evanescent things. All his earthly possessions were a bamboo stick, a wooden bowl for water, kamandalu, and a loincloth. Besides the previously mentioned 2 small books, Maharshi wrote some hymns and commentaries in Sanskrit, Tamil, and Telugu. These have been translated into English, some with forewords by eminent English writers. Throughout his life, the great Rishi was always accessible to any visitor. In his presence, no distinction was given to caste, so rigidly followed in India. Brahmins sat with pariahs, Muslims and Westerners. The visible presence of the Spirit in man united the troubled world at his feet. He was supreme, far above all levels of human understanding. That intangible atmosphere of spiritual peace dissolved all doubts in his presence. The writer came to him in the very last period of his earthly life, and believes this to be the most glorious period of all. As the sun sinks in a blaze of sunset glory, so Maharshi's last years reflected the indescribable beauty of his manifestation. I saw the man as he showed the victory of spirit over matter. His physical suffering, lasting for more than a year, was a crucifixion in my eyes. For him, there was no alleviation in hospital, although the sickness was deadly. He always gave the permanent darshan for our sakes. He always sat before us, and no movement or complaint ever showed the depth of his suffering. He took no anesthetics. He wanted no cure. Knowing all that could be expected of his own physical body, his thought was always with us, for us, who went to him to seek relief from our own sufferings, and to none did he refuse his blessing. His spiritual alchemy transmuted the hard materialism of our hearts into something pure and noble. In the glory of his presence, we learned to live in eternity, to remember our lost inheritance of spirit and bliss. Sometimes, when I sat near him, absorbing the invisible radiations of his light, I meditated, to whom and when can I repay this bliss? Who is it that is taking away the burdens and debts of my life? He has no sin, has never performed an evil deed. But what is there about me, about all of us, who are gathered together at his feet, seeking solace and power to endure our petty discomforts? His body, which has committed no sin, is suffering agony in our presence, who are healthy in spite of our guilt. The mysterious voice asks, are you ready to accept responsibility for that? The soundless answer is, yes, if you will always be with me. And the conviction arises within that he is and will be forever. And this concludes that chapter, which was quite wonderful. So here on YouTube, I'm also reading a book called A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. And it's his search for truth in India, a search for the rishis. And I'm about halfway through it. So if you'd like to listen to that, that would be great. I'm enjoying that book very much as well as this one by Mouni Sadhu. So, till soon. In Days of Great Peace by Mouni Sadhu, Chapter 7, A Wish Fulfilled. Many years ago, under the sky of a far-off country in Europe, in the third year of the terrible conflagration of the First World War, a young man in military uniform was sitting on the platform of a small railway station, waiting for his train. It was to take him to the front line, where the fire of battle was then raging, a fire from which so many never returned. Compelled by the storm of war to leave his family and his studies, he sat there brooding over the fate awaiting him in a few days. It was the beginning of autumn, a season when the dark night skies are often cut by the fiery lines of falling stars or meteors. He remembered a current belief that a wish spontaneously expressed in the very second when such a star falls is always fulfilled. Unconsciously, he was looking into the sky with a strange expectation. Suddenly, a bright red line appeared among the glowing stars. The heart of the young man whispered the one word, love. Many years passed. The moment of the falling star vanished completely from his memory. The deep wish of the heart was utterly forgotten in the fever and the bustle of worldly life. The young dreamer, now a mature man, went through all the experiences of normal life. He had friends. He loved, as he believed, women. He revered those whom he regarded as his superiors. But each experience brought him a disappointment. At the end of each one, he saw that not yet had he found true love, which would give him the fullness that was unconsciously his constant longing. He felt in every love a jarring note, a hidden doubt, a small flaw. Hence, he was never able to give to anyone without reservation such a depth of affection and love in the midst of which he could not dream of a still greater and deeper one. A soundless yet powerful voice was always whispering in his heart, "It is not that, not yet is it this." But at the same time, in moments of peace, he was certain that somewhere Beyond a stormy sea and a cloudy sky, there is a mysterious land where the sun of bliss never sets, where the eternal waves are surging without movement on the shores of the island called fulfillment.